So I hope you guys enjoy the Urban Forest Management Group to start us off.
Hello everyone, thank you for that introduction, Brad and Trevor. My name is Tess Billings. This is James Wishart and Jake Outram. We are 3 of the 11 fourth-year forestry students that have been working on the Urban Forest Management Plan over the last year. I'd like to take this time to welcome our client, Dan Hicks, and the team from the City of Moncton that is here today. This has been a challenging and educational project for us, and we're excited to show you some results. So this afternoon, we'll start with a project overview. We'll go over our objectives for the project. We'll discuss our inventory design and results, street tree values, threats to the Moncton street tree population. We'll present our operations plan. We'll conclude our presentation, and we'll give some acknowledgements. So some street tree history for the City of Moncton. Back in the 70s to the 90s, the initial concern was Dutch elm disease, and within this 20-year time period, about 10,000 trees were removed. Planting efforts began in 1992 and have continued to the present time. The records indicate that over 5,500 species have been planted. The City of Moncton started the street tree inventory back in 2014, and will continue it up until September 2015 when our group took on the project. So our project goal is to present the City of Moncton with a master plan designed to promote health, diversity, and value of the population. For the purpose of our project, we define a street tree as any tree that falls between the city right-of-way. This was determined by a GIS shapefile that was provided to us by the City of Moncton. A healthy street tree can provide many benefits. It can increase property value, aesthetics, interception of rain, urban vegetation, a healthy street tree can also decrease energy costs, water runoff, air pollution, soil erosion, noise, and so as you can see here, these are the 12 current tree maintenance zones in the City of Moncton. The City of Moncton is located in the southeastern corner of New Brunswick. To give you a location reference within these tree zones, Zone 1 would be where Magnetic Hill is located, and Zone 12 would be the downtown core of Moncton. As I mentioned before, the City of Moncton began their inventory in 2014. They collected 5,636 trees. We came in and completed the inventory with 3,068 for a grand total of 8,704 trees. The City of Moncton is comprised of 100 different tree species. Objective 1 for our project was to determine the health of the street tree population. To complete this objective, we will determine size class distribution, assess if the forest is greater than or equal to 80% healthy, determine if each genus comprises less than or equal to 10% of the total population, and assessing if improper species and site associations account for less than or equal to 25% of the population. Our second objective is to estimate the total value of the street tree population as it pertains to social, economic, and environmental values. To do this, we will estimate the social value, the economic value, and the environmental value. Our third and final objective is to use technology to forecast growth and yield and develop an operations plan designed to improve social, economic, and environmental values through time. To do this, we will forecast growth and yield, and we will develop an operations plan.
Thank you, Tess. So to realize these 3 objectives, we needed a complete inventory of every street tree in the city. And as Tess indicated, the City of Moncton had started this, and we completed it this about November of this year. So we used Trimble field computers to collect GPS coordinates, the civic address of every street tree. We determined ownership, so whether or not the tree is completely owned by the city or shared between the homeowner and the city. We measured diameter at breast height. We tallied the height of the tree. We would identify the species, assign a planting class. Planting class refers to the space around the tree. The space it occupies. It has nothing to do with the actual tree itself. We would assign a wire type rating of 1 to 17. This refers to the type of power lines that are overhead of the tree, if any at all. We would also assign the tree a maintenance class of 1 to 5. What these maintenance classes are various classes that incorporate measures of health. So a class 1 tree is a healthy tree where no maintenance is required. A class 2 tree is a healthy tree that only requires some clearance pruning over a road or sidewalk. This is an example of a class 2 tree before and after maintenance. The other end of this, a class 5 tree is a tree scheduled for removal. These are trees that have less than 25% live crown, could have major defects, or could even be hazardous to the public. So with this inventory complete, we were able to realize our first objective and quantify measures of forest health. We did this by identifying 4 different measurable indicators, the first of which is a simple assessment of the current condition. We used our 5 maintenance classes, keeping in mind these incorporate various measures of street tree health, to classify these into 3 different health categories. Class 1 and 2 trees indicate healthy status, 3 and 4 indicate unhealthy status, and 5 as well, either dead or ready for removal. We established a target to achieve greater than 80% of the population in this healthy category, and we found that only 75% of the population is in this category. The second measure defining street tree health is the distribution of genera. This is a measure of diversity in the population. We established a target to have no single genus make up any more than 10% of the street tree population. We found that maple actually makes up 50% of the population, and 41% of all maples are actually Norway maple species. The third measure defining street tree health is a measure of structural diversity. This is a comparison of the diameter distribution by 20 centimeter class compared to a recommended distribution. What this recommended distribution accounts for is succession in the street tree population. It's adapted from uneven age forest management with the idea that there are always individuals in the smallest diameter class to replace individuals in the larger diameter classes leaving the population. We notice here that these are quite comparable, these 2 distributions, if we consider this population as a whole. We choose to break this down a little further and look at this by individual management zone. We see there's quite a bit of variance in these distributions. We've chosen to illustrate 3 different zones here just to show you how variable these distributions can be. Our fourth and final measure of street tree health is a measure of species and site associations. And what this is a measure of how well tree stature is suited to planting class. What tree stature refers to is the expected size or form of a tree at maturity. What we did here is we've quantified the number of each planting class, and we've determined what percentage of these sites are occupied by the appropriate stature tree. And we found that 100% of class 1 sites are occupied by the appropriate stature tree because they are not limited by rooting area and there are no overhead power lines present or overhead obstructions. So although we recommend a large stature tree here, any tree stature is suitable for these planting locations. We found that there are 2,406 class 3 sites, and that only 23% of these sites are actually occupied by small trees. These trees are limited by rooting area with less than 2 meters rooting width, and they also have power lines present. So the recommended tree stature is small. So to summarize our 4 measurable indicators defining forest health, we determined that the size class distribution is comparable when we consider the population as a whole, but not when we consider individual management zones. We have determined that the population is just shy of 80% healthy at a value of 75% healthy. We've also determined that there is 1 genus that makes up greater than 10% of the street tree population. That's the maple genus, which makes up 50%. And we have also set a target to ensure that improper species and site associations are limited to less than 25% of the population. And we have found that these associations actually represent 33% of the population.
Once again, the second objective was to estimate the total value of the population as it pertains to social, economic, and environmental values. So for the economic evaluation, we completed a replacement value. This was done using the CTLA formula, which stands for the Council of Tree and Landscape Appraisers. This is the North American standard for tree appraisal. It takes into account the cost per centimeter squared to plant a tree, multiplied by the cross-sectional area of the appraisal tree, and it is then multiplied by a series of discounts, including species, condition, and location. An example of one of these discounts would be a sugar maple tree growing on a class 3 planting site. A sugar maple tree is considered a large statured tree, and a class 3 planting site is not suitable to a large statured tree due to its limited rooting area and overhead obstruction. Because of this sugar maple will likely never reach its full replacement value, and therefore it is discounted. The total street tree population of the City of Moncton is estimated to have a total replacement value of $114 million. The highest value street tree in the City of Moncton is a 143 centimeter silver maple located at 100 Somerset. It is estimated to have a replacement value of just under $350,000. Here is a graph of replacement value by zone. As you can see, the colors on the graph correspond with the colors on the map. So your green areas are your higher replacement values, and the reds and orange are the lower. So zone 12 is the downtown area. This is the highest replacement value zone. This is where a lot of the older and larger trees are located in the city of Moncton. Zones 1 and 5 are your lowest value zones. These are newer development areas and they have younger and smaller trees.
So on top of the current replacement value, we've also estimated an annual dollar value associated with all the environmental benefits that the street trees provide. This is in terms of offsetting carbon emissions, removing pollution from the air, and mitigating stormwater runoff. So as trees grow, they take in carbon dioxide and they release oxygen. This offsets a portion of the carbon emissions from burning fossil fuels. So every year, our trees take in 60 tons of carbon, releasing 160 tons of oxygen and offsetting around 4% of the fuel emissions from city-owned vehicles. We estimate this as a value of $4,700 a year. Trees take in certain pollutants as they're dissolved in rain, and they intercept others as from the air with their leaf surface area. This includes ozones, like greenhouse gas, and some pollutants that cause respiratory issues such as dust fall or particulate matter. Every year our street trees take in 1.25 tons of pollution, which we estimate at $6,500 a year in healthcare savings. Trees can also be seen as part of the city's infrastructure. We're dealing with stormwater as they intercept rain and take up and filter stormwater through the roots during evapotranspiration. Every year our trees take in 345 million liters of stormwater, which has a massive environmental benefit of $1.46 million a year in water treatment savings. Here we see them distributed by zone, and zone 12 again in the downtown core has the highest mitigation rate because it has the largest trees in that zone. When we add up all the environmental values for offsetting carbon emissions, saving healthcare costs, and water treatment savings, the total annual value is $1.47 million a year. We've also estimated a social value based on how the City of Moncton's residents value their street trees. We did this by releasing a public opinion survey, which was advertised by radio, newspaper, Facebook, and the City of Moncton website. Got over 485 respondents in just over 2 months, which is great for us. The most significant result we found from this survey is that 65% of respondents thought street trees, budget allocation towards street trees is very important, and 94% said it was at least somewhat important. This could be a very useful stat to present to City Council when we're asking for more budget for our operation plan.
So the goal of assessing the threats to the Moncton street tree population is to decrease future susceptibility of pest and disease by 2037 through recommendations within the operations plan. So the pest risk assessment that was done was based off the current location of the pest, the abundance of host species, and the potential dollar loss. The five pests that were looked at were eastern spruce budworm, Dutch elm disease, emerald ash borer, gypsy moth, and Asian longhorn beetle. We determined that spruce budworm, Dutch elm disease, and emerald ash borer pose a low risk to the City of Moncton. This is because they have a low abundance of host species. Gypsy moth attacks approximately 70% of the population of the City of Moncton street trees, but they are a defoliator and they do not directly cause tree death, so we determined this to be a moderate risk to the City of Moncton. The Asian longhorn beetle is currently a low risk to the City of Moncton, and this is simply because the insect is not there. If the Asian longhorn beetle arrives in the City of Moncton, it will be considered a high risk. This insect attacks approximately 60% of Moncton street tree population, but it is a very damaging insect and it will likely kill all of the trees. So the City of Moncton is currently monitoring for 2 insects. They're monitoring for gypsy moth and emerald ash borer. Emerald ash borer is not present in the City of Moncton. They have set out traps, but they have not captured any. Gypsy moth, on the other hand, is. So this graph indicates the average number of male gypsy moths captured over a 10-year period, and as you can see, it is on an upward trend. Since we determined the Asian longhorn beetle to be a high risk to the City of Moncton, we decided to map the areas of greatest concern. And if you can remember, zone 12 was the highest replacement value, and it is the zone that is the most concerned for this insect if it arrives.
So our third and final objective was to use technology to forecast growth and yield of the street tree population and to develop an operations plan that addresses environmental, economic, and social values over time. So to do this, we identified some long-term strategies. We've established a target to increase the value of the street tree population by 10% in the next 20 years. To do this, we recommend the removal of dead or hazardous street trees, We recommend the establishment of 5-year pruning cycles for trees over the age of 15 years and 3-year training cycles for trees under the age of 15 years. We recommend that the city adopts a more proactive approach to management rather than the current reactive one. And we also recommend the planting of large stature tree species that are resilient to climate change, and species that have low susceptibility to damage from pest and disease. So to prioritize work in the next 5 years, we have taken the entire inventory and classified it into 4 different operational lists based on the type of operation. We found that list 1 is a list of removals, so these are class 5, maintenance class 5 trees. List 2 is a list of trees that are older than 15 years. These trees are pruned on a 5-year cycle. List 3 is what we refer to as YTT, which is young tree training. These are trees that are less than 15 years old, and these are pruned on a 3-year cycle. The 4th and final list, summarizing the 5-year operations plan, is a list for stumps that are ready for removal. Using actual productivity rates and costs associated with these activities that we acquired from Parks and Leisure Services, City of Moncton's 2016 working year, we were able to determine that this work can be done in the next 5 years for a cost of $267,000. This equates to an additional $53,000 on top of the current annual operating budget. So to facilitate the establishment of 5-year pruning cycles in the city, we've further grouped the 12 management zones into 5 operational sectors. And we did this by looking at street tree size by zone. This gives us some indication as to the amount of work there is to be done. Here's a breakdown of which zones are included in which sectors, as well as an estimated cost associated with the activities in each. So these sum up the recommendations for the maintenance of existing trees, and we've also provided some recommendations on the establishment of new trees. So in the way of tree planting, we recommend the city maximizes annual planting activities with allowable resources and available budget. We recommend that you favor the establishment of large stature tree species in Class 1 sites, but regardless of the site you choose to plant, we recommend that you ensure proper species and site associations. A few species we would recommend you plant are oak species, hackberry or elm cultivars that are resistant to Dutch elm disease, and we would recommend avoid planting any more Norway maple or ash species. The 5th and final recommendation is to document future planting activities with detail and ensure that newly planted street trees are added to the street tree inventory as well as added to young tree training lists. We've also quantified diversity by sector. This is the diversity of genera, so a tree genus. This is a measure of the number of species in a given area as well as the relative abundance of each. We found that sectors 5, 4, and 2 have the lowest street tree diversity, and that we recommend planting activities are focused there. Note that these zones are actually zones that these areas of the city are also areas of the city that correspond with diameters, or with zones lacking the recommended diameter distribution. So by focusing your planting activities in these zones, not only will you increase street tree diversity, but you can also increase the structural diversity of the population.
So to forecast the growth of the street tree population, we took coring samples from every species group in Moncton. We took these coring samples and measured the annual growth rings to create age to diameter relationships for all of these species groups, seen here for the elm species group. Using these equations, we were able to forecast for 20 years from now what the population is going to look like in terms of volume and values associated with volume. So to forecast, we accounted for how the operations plan was going to affect the growth of these trees. We accounted for death by assigning mortality rates for different size trees, and we assumed that 100 trees a year would be planted. With these assumptions, our model predicts that in year 2037, the population size is going to increase by 15%. The volume will increase by 24%, and the replacement value of the population will increase by 32%. And this accounts for the value of all of the newly added trees, as well as the added health benefits that we are going to get from the operations plan. And I'll note now that the City of Moncton last year planted more than 100 trees, so if they continue on that trend, these values will be even higher. Here's an estimation of what a management plan of this caliber would cost for 11 students at a rate of $22 an hour. Based on the hours that we put into it this semester, it would be $74,000. So I'll now like to go over a summary of the key results from our management plan. We found that 74% of the trees are healthy, 75. The current replacement value is $114 million and gains $1.47 million every year in environmental benefits. 65% of survey respondents said that budget allocation towards street trees is very important. And with our operations plan, we will see an added $53,400 a year on top of the current annual budget. And within 20 years, if implemented, we should see a 32% increase in the replacement value. So looking at the original objectives of our management plan, we'll see the fulfillment of our tasks that we set out at the beginning of the year. So objective 1, we assess the health of the Moncton's street tree population. Objective 2, we estimated social, economic, environmental values. And objective 3, we used growth and yield forecasting to develop an operations plan. As all 3 of these objectives have been satisfied, the Moncton Street Tree Management Plan is now complete. We would like to acknowledge Dan Hicks in the City of Moncton Parks and Leisure, our faculty supervisors, Ed Serwinski and Jason Golding, as well as the rest of the faculty who helped us out along the way. And here is a list of our student participants who have worked very hard on this project since the start of the year, who I'd now like to invite up on the stage and open the floor for any questions that you may have with our project. Thank you.